Okay, cool. So thank you very much. Nice to meet everybody today. Today, the topic is all about what's important in terms of payroll and payroll solutions. In terms of the agenda, we're going to go through the sort of key areas that is affecting payroll. So obviously, fairly obvious, why is payroll important? I think staff will be able to tell you that quite quickly. What systems are involved in payroll? So the different attributes which make up a payroll output, and I'll see how Microsoft can help actually with the payroll process. And then we've got some Q&A processes as well. So we're going to really focus on actually the concepts around payroll, the different things that make it a payroll good, work and accurate, and obviously the impact of that. And then we'll do a bit of a demonstration of a payroll solution, just show you what's sort of capable, what the art of the possible is, and then obviously any questions we can take at the end. So to start off with, the first thing is, why is payroll important? I think this is fairly straightforward, fairly obvious. Being able to reward staff, recognise staff, their achievements, what they're trying to do, both maybe sales, a commission point of view, a bonus point of view, and really building trust in terms of the organisation, especially at the moment, in the likes of COVID, what's happening around the world with furloughs and redundancies, and having trusted staff is a really important thing, because obviously that helps with your business as usual, your continuity, and so on and so on, which it helps you keep your clients. As a kind of the opposite, if you look at it, what can go wrong with payroll? So paying people late when the people are expecting it. They may have mortgage payments, they may have loan payments, they may have activities they're planning. So the day of when you get paid is actually very important to a lot of people. The wrong amount. So obviously, if you pay someone too much, the process of reclaiming is generally quite hard. You have to have special employment contracts in place in terms of being able to reclaim money. Quite often nowadays, it's mostly as part of a standard employment contract. But you need to be able to manage that. And obviously, if you pay people less, then obviously people are starting to question, well, what's going on? Why are you doing this? Especially when it comes to bonus and commission and those sort of things, or overtime or flexi-time. The wrong amount can be very, very sensitive to a lot of people. And then obviously the downside to it is you lose that trust of your staff into the business. And then obviously the potential repercussions of that is you affect the quality of the performance of the employees, which then affects the quality of the performance and delivery of the organisation, or you could potentially lose key members of staff. So if we looked at what the key impacts that relate to a payroll process, if you like. You've got the employment contracts, you've got the attendance of staff in terms of, are they turning up from a day-to-day point of view? Are they on holiday? What holiday they've got? How much holiday they've used? Are they using too much holiday? The compensation process, the benefits, what benefits have been allocated to somebody? And also, as you'll see more and more, flexi-time, which is becoming more and more important, and also challenging as well from an employee point of view, to be able to, if you think about how flexi-time really works, it's really about trying to understand how many hours people work within a time frame, and generally time frames aren't managed within a month cycle as normal payroll parameters are normally calculated, but actually time in a flexi system is normally done over maybe a 2 to 3 month period. So obviously you're tracking over a 2 to 3 month period, but you're paying people on a monthly basis. So there's a whole load of complications around companies who are starting to move more and more towards flexi-time. So we take a bit more of a detailed look into each of these one by one. So contracts to begin with. Obviously, there's a whole complication of IR35 around the contracts, managing those contracts, managing the activities related to those contracts, understanding what the rules are, what the rules aren't. It will affect essentially how you do payroll. And contractors will generally work if an organisation is using them. There's some sort of element of timesheets. There'll be an approval process from what people are submitting. It should go through an approval process. You've got expenses. Are they budgeted expenses? Are they external expenses? Are they unexpected expenses? And then obviously you will have a budget management process generally to say, we are working with a contractor, we've allocated X budget to this project or to a contractor or to a department. And it's actually how you go through an approval process and then make sure you're not overpaying people that want too much money and so on and so on. So permanent staff is obviously probably more familiar with most organizations. So this is really working about adjustments. So things like where there's changes, manual adjustment, and automatic adjustment, how you manage those processes. And also how you deal with overtime. Do people get paid extra? Is it in the contract? And so on. All that details is generally held within a contract. And then obviously you need to manage those contracts, manage the information, manage actually what's happening on a month by month basis, and then do some sort of calculation, which will then help you generate your payroll. And obviously one of the key things that large organizations have, they may have one person that actually fulfills multiple roles. So for example, somebody may be head of finance, but they could also be head of operations. And with an organization, you may have different budgets for finance and operations. And so you actually need to split the salary into different cost codes or budget centers to enable you to get an accurate management from a financial point of view. And obviously employee codes, being able to change and update PAYE codes when an employee notifies you. Obviously, the tax codes can change quite often, and obviously you need to be able to have a system which is flexible and easy to accommodate those systems as well. And then you've got the whole world of complexity around 0 hours tracking in terms of managing those hours, managing what they're doing, managing what they're doing, and also resource management. So if you've got people sitting on the bench, how you use them, how you notify them, checking their availability. And obviously there's a whole load of complication around those sort of types of contracts as well. In terms of attendance, so we've got different areas we need to be focusing on. So some organizations will have this checking in and checking out sort of concept of say, actually, especially with Flexi-time, this is becoming more and more popular. So you know what? I don't have to work 9 hours a day or 7 hours a day or 4 hours a day. I can work 2 hours, but tomorrow I'm going to work 10 hours, and the next day I'm going to work 3 hours, and so on and so on. And to do that, you need to be able to either trust people implicitly or have a system which can allow you to track that information. And then obviously how you manage that information, how you track it, how you summarize that information, and then how you pass that information to a payroll can be a challenge in its own right. Location tracking. So again, organizations which are things like cleaners is a good example. So are they actually at the location when they're checking in and checking out, or are they at home watching TV and then saying, yeah, I spent 2 hours cleaning this office block and so on and so on. So there's a whole concept around location tracking as well. And then obviously you've got the approval process, which is pretty straightforward. In terms of attendance, again, the attendance of an employee will dramatically affect payroll. So for instance, depending on what your rules are around SMP and those sort of concepts in terms of what's the statutory mandatory pay, and you need to be able to see actually what's the government rate, what are you doing as an organisation, being able to track to make sure that if somebody's off sick for 3 days, and then there's a bank holiday Monday, and then they're sick on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, actually that's not two lots of 3, that's actually considered as a 7-day sequence. So obviously then that will then change actually what the rate of pay is, because they will then dip into the statutory mandatory pay levels. And to be able to manage that sort of data and that level of complexity, this is where these sort of payroll systems can actually get quite complex. And obviously maternity, paternity, you see I've also got keeping in touch days. So one of the things with maternity and paternity leave is, mostly maternity leave, but depending on if it's a long-term paternity, actually is being able to manage keeping in touch days, managing what they do, managing the approval to make sure they're within the scope of what a KIT process is, and obviously manage the track and obviously changing their salary accordingly for each of those days. And also things like balances, and do you allow accruals and so on? What's the current balances? How much have they accrued over a period of time, or do they roll over to the next quarter? It's all going to affect the payroll on a consistent basis, because you need to be able to track all of these things to make sure people get the right amount of pay. And the same as sickness, if it's short-term or long-term sickness, and so on and so on. there's a whole load of complexity around the different types of sickness and disciplinary and so on and so on, which will impact on payroll. So again, compensations, again, especially with salespeople and organisations where they're paying bonuses and commissions, there is a dramatic mistrust associated to missed payments or reduced payments. So people get very sensitive, very precious about actually that what they think they deserve to be earned or what they feel they're going to receive in terms of commission and bonus. And if you get those wrong, if you're not able to calculate them efficiently, they become a massive overhead to any organisation in terms of having to troll through lots of data to work out exactly how much commission, what the sales targets are, how much sales have been generated, have the sales actually been paid, within what time scale. There's so many different criteria of why sales commissions can be quite difficult to challenge, but ultimately the data needs to be fed into the payroll. The same with things like salary sacrifices, how you record these, where you're recording these, dividends, court orders. So when HMRC says actually you need to take this money out of this person's salary at source, so that because they're not paying for those sort of things, they all need to be, all that information needs to be captured, needs to be managed. And also compensation, as obviously there's a whole load of policies around if you had an agreement where you parted ways with somebody, then actually as part of that settlement, they could receive potentially up to £30,000 tax-free as part of any leaving settlement. So it's actually managing, that's not just 30k of extra salary that they're going to be receiving in terms of pay, but actually there's an amount of money that needs to be handled in a completely separate way. And obviously each of the different elements has to be handled accurately to generate things like P11D, so you're managing your benefit in kind as well. Next thing is around benefits. So most organisations will provide some form of benefits, if nothing else other than pension, obviously, which is a mandatory compulsory requirement nowadays. Tracking the benefits, you may have multiple different benefit packages. You may have different options within that benefit, tracking to see who's enrolled with what, how many enrollments they've got, what's the value and of the enrollment to the organisation, to the employee, be able to see that sort of information to see actually why should we actually provide medical and dental? Do people really use the dental? Are they getting value from it? What's the cost impact? What's the value to the staff? Be able to analyse this sort of information is really important. Be able to take information and then submit it to HMRC to enable you to do your P11Ds. Obviously, for people who do self-assessments, is obviously important. And then obviously be able to produce official documents in a way that's HMRC compliant is really key. And we talked a little bit about Flexi-time already, but essentially Flexi-time is becoming more and more popular nowadays. It really is becoming something which is not just something that a few organisations do, but actually something, and I think with the involvement of COVID and the home working, this is going to become more and more of a, not of a concern, but more and more of a hot topic moving forward. Whereas more and more people are trying to, rather than fit their lives around work, they're starting to fit their work around their lives. So potentially they may be doing this working from home, so they're doing a school run, and so actually they're not available between 8:30 and 9:30 or 8 o'clock and 9:30 because of traffic and so on and so on. But actually there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of information nowadays that actually Flexi-time gets more out of people. They're more satisfied, they work harder in those shorter sprints, they're more focused. So a lot of organisations are starting to offer this more and more. And also you get away from this culture of the team status overview, if you like. So actually at 9 o'clock, if everybody's not active in teams, is that a good or bad thing? There's a slight pressure that builds generally within organisations to say, look, I've got to be online at 9 o'clock because everyone thinks I'm not going to be doing my job, or everyone thinks I'm having breakfast or watching TV. So there's a whole case of mental well-being being brought into the concept of managing time, managing availability. Just because you're at home doesn't mean you're not working, but actually if you could work around your commitments and then provide that extra effort and focus, then actually you get a lot more out of employees. In most cases, there's obviously key exceptions where people are working shift hours and so on and so on. But essentially being able to manage that flexi time, being able to provide it as a benefit is a great thing for a lot of organizations, but you need to be able to track it both fairly and also accurately, because most flexi time requirements aren't actually numbers of hours within a month. They're normally done over a 2 to 3 month period. And obviously you think about the complexity from a payroll system, whereby you're paying somebody each month, yet they may be under the number of hours required within a 3 month period. So actually at that end of the 3 month period, then actually they've been paid more money than they should have been paid. So it's actually how you manage that process. Do you just deduct it from the next salary, or do you flatten the curve, or do you backwards deduct it? So it's being able to think about how you want to achieve those things, how you want to implement it, and how you communicate it to the staff, both from a communication point of view, but also on the payslip as well. So people rely on payslips to give them the information they need so they can then validate and verify the information. So as you can see, payroll within most organizations is just a thing that happens. People receive pay and it's fantastic, but actually a lot of organizations are becoming more and more complex because of the changing working practices. And actually there's more and more elements which are becoming more and more important that will either mean you have a lot of administration every month, or you use systems, you use tools to support and maintain the information and for approvals. And actually it's a fairly simple process that can be trusted and relied upon. And it depends on the organization, depends on the size of the organization, but actually one thing for sure is payroll is getting more and more complex as days go by. So if we looked at, if you like, what are the key systems involved within a payroll, I think most organizations will have some level of spreadsheets. There'll be probably a filing cabinet around, especially around the employment contracts, things like the opting out of 48-hour working hour practices, maybe the ability to reclaim money from somebody's account. They may or may not have a HR system, a finance system. They will probably have some sort of form of it, or again, it could be spreadsheets even. And then obviously you've got the inevitable HMRC. So again, if we go for the same sort of approach, just talking through each of these areas, what sort of spreadsheets are still very commonplace when it comes to capturing information, managing the data, and so on and so on. There's obviously, with Office 365 and SharePoint, it makes version control much easier nowadays, and the fact that you can share access. Again, we all recognise there's various limitations around managing your spreadsheets and putting your data, tracking and so on, although it is much better with SharePoint. But essentially a lot of people are looking at things like attendance, have somebody turned up, what time do they turn up, what holidays they've used, what holidays they've got, sickness, what the sickness was, how many days of sickness you've got, what benefits people are using, student loans, do they have a student loan, are they using it as part of the deduction in terms of a salary sacrifice, are they working on the cycle to work scheme, so how is that salary sacrifice element being applied to their pay, and so on and so on. And different organizations will have different level of sophistication. Some will have some amazing spreadsheets with cross formulas and all sorts of crazy stuff going on, and other people just have some quite basic stuff. But again, the level of reportability, and I'm sure there'll be some people who'll argue with me, say, yeah, but you can do Power BI and Excel, but really the ability to do trend analysis and reporting and to give you the level of intelligence that you can make smarter, better decisions moving forward, it's fairly limited within a spreadsheet. In terms of filing cabinet, most people nowadays still have filing cabinets in their office. They'll have things like employment contracts, they'll have policies around benefits, conditions, commission schemes, those sort of things, printed out, signed by the employee, signed by the employer, and set in stone. And then obviously, as you can all see in this week, the government have just said, please don't go to your offices, please for work from home. So if you're relying on a filing cabinet in the corner of your office, then that's a pretty tricky situation. If somebody suddenly queries your commission schedule and say, look, actually, I think I should have got this. Well, let's have a look at the contract. actually we can't because we can't get access to it. So again, you may have made them all electronic, you may have put them digital, but again, having the information in such a way can prove a challenge with a lot of organizations. And again, people are moving away from this sort of traditional paper filing systems to get data accessible, searchable, and also remote as well. So we talk about HR system. Again, not many organizations have full-blown HR systems. People do varying levels. Some are outsourced by organizations. Some have on-premise solutions. Some are just like an Access database or a spreadsheet. But other organizations go for, which is becoming more and more popular, so SaaS, so software as a service, becoming more and more popular, being able to manage your HR, building your HR processes, HR approval workflows, and also one of the key things which is becoming more and more popular as well is providing some sort of employee portal as well. So that's one of the key capabilities of most systems nowadays at SaaS, being able to have where an employee can log on and be able to see everything to do with their little world. And also from a line management point of view, so a line manager being able to log on and see their world, but also any direct reports as well through some sort of portal. Again, HR will play a key part in this. If you're not using the filing cabinet and spreadsheets, then this is where the data would generally be held. Look at the role that finance plays. Obviously, there will be a link to an employee record within a finance system generally. Some companies will group it into a general ledger account, which is staff costs and staff expenses, but generally most organizations will actually have the individual employees listed out either as accounts or as records or as items, depending on your finance system. And essentially you would want to be able to record different dimensions, such as different staff reporting to different departments, so you can then do further analysis about breakdown of staff, gender, ethnicity, and also pay grades and pay salary and benefits. So again, the sort of finance system would also hold information about your liabilities around PAYE, NIC, those sort of capabilities, obviously standard stuff you'd expect. And obviously there may or may not be some sort of integration to your system, depending on how many employees you got, but rather than manually set up payments for every member of staff, every single member of the month, ideally you want to go through an approval process and then push the data into the finance system so that you get all of that information in one place. And obviously, moving forward as you're tracking your liabilities in terms of what you owe the taxman, and obviously that all that information is then held in your chart of accounts and also your balance sheet as well. It's also important to note that commission calculations are quite often done on a finance system. Depending on an organization, you may be tracking to see actually what's the value of an invoices per types of clients related to a salesperson, or you may say actually we only pay based upon goods which have been paid as opposed to invoices raised. So again, this is the sort of area where a finance system would play a key part, enable you to accurately generate your commission structures. So in terms of HMRC, obviously there's a process you go through in terms of onboarding of new staff. There's also a process of submitting payroll information. There's obviously a compliance point of view to make sure you've entered all the information correctly. You're obviously managing your liabilities so you can see how much outstanding you owe the taxman. And also, as you've seen probably quite recently, there's a whole new world of complexity around not only furlough in terms of identifying which staff on furlough, but even more so, it's now tracking which staff on furlough, but also then starting to drill down and look at, from an individual employee point of view, which days they are working and which days they're not working, because again, this is going to dramatically affect your furlough claim. And again, it's getting companies thinking about actually how they track their time and attendance of employees on what they're doing. Is it internal training, which is a furlough, or is it customer training, which would then be a project activity which wouldn't classify as furlough. Being able to track all this information is obviously going to add extra complexity, but it's going to massively affect your payroll. And what you don't want to be doing, and there was something in the press a couple of days ago that organisations have had to give back, it's something like over £215 million of incorrectly calculated and incorrectly claimed furlough money from the government. And obviously you may think, well, that's a lot of money, and it clearly is a lot of money, but actually probably the real impact to those organisations wasn't necessarily the money itself, although it's important. It was actually the process they had to go through to approve and validate all that information, and then to work out what the actual information is, and then to resubmit it, and then do the clawback, and then do the payments. If you actually took all that manual processing that those companies would have went through just to make sure that they were compliant and so on, would have been absolutely enormous, unless they had good systems, unless they had integrated payroll system. This is why these sort of things are so important. Moving forward, obviously, hopefully, there's not going to be the same sort of challenges as we have, but obviously, as the workforce changes, as a modern workforce evolves through homework and flexi hours and so on and so on, this what the tracking is going to be a key thing. So just to talk about for a few moments about Microsoft. So Microsoft, obviously, as you know, with Microsoft 365, formerly known as Office 365, there's lots of capabilities and lots of solutions. There's lots of tools which people are familiar with on a day-to-day basis, such as Office 365, the email system, to do with maybe Teams. You're probably living and breathing inside Teams. You may be using things like SharePoint, document management, and lots of capabilities Microsoft provide. But what you can do is you can start to knit these technologies together to make your lives easier. So all the things that we talked about previously around compliance, around capturing information, around managing data, around approval processes, Microsoft provides you a full set of tools that can start to take it from being a very heavy admin process, which is done once a month, but spending 2 or 3 more days, to being something which actually is a very slick and quick approval process. We'll just talk briefly about actually how Microsoft and the technologies are available to support these sort of processes. The three, and there's obviously more we could talk about, but the 3 sort of core ones I'm going to focus on today is Business Central, which is obviously the finance product. This comes with Dynamics 365 which is held actually within the Office 365 tenant. So it's all housed in the UK, or wherever your tenant is situated. Then you've got the Power Platform, so you've got the capability to extend and take things forward in different ways. And I'll show you some examples of stuff that we've done before. And then Teams, which most organisations are quite familiar with, quite comfortable with, and actually is becoming the new workplace of an employee. They don't so much think about workplaces in the location of a building. Actually, their workplace nowadays is within an application, and the application generally is Microsoft Teams. So to start off with, we'll talk about how a finance system can help and how Business Central can help. And one of the core things that can do very easily, very simply, is it links to Office 365 Active Directory. So the employees that you put into the system are automatically pulled into Business Central. So it manages those users, and obviously you can manage them as set of employees. So it makes the whole setup and management of the data much easier. So the reporting structure is done through Azure. So you've got your direct line and your indirect lines. You've got your job title, your role, and everything that you manage for your Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and all that data is then synchronized into BC. So it makes the setup simple and easy. In terms of the roadmap of Business Central, they're really looking to focus moving forwards the next few years. It's all about data, it's all about the CDS, it's all about the Power Platform, and it's all about integration and intelligence. And you'll see some of the things we talk about are how they actually affect itself. I'm just going to go into a bit of a product demo at this point. I'm just going to cancel out this. So this is Business Central. And within Business Central, we've got a setup. And obviously within Business Central, you can have different roles. So there's a role called a payroll processor. Within the payroll processor, it gives you all the access to all the key information. So if I wanted to go into employees and see a list of the employees, it will then show me all the employees within the system. So again, this is synchronized with Office 365 Azure Active Directory. So you have that nice link. And then obviously within an employee, we can then actually go in and see information about who they are, what they do. And then you can also see all the core information. So you can have a picture of the person, obviously linked it to AD as well, of course. Then you have information about their address information. And then you also have information about their payroll. So salary levels, salary grades, paid cycles, tax area code. So again, it does support multi-region, multi-locations. It also gives you total earnings, balances, total deductions on a year-by-year basis, or broken down by periods as well. So you see all the information, if it's a shift area, and obviously the bank details as well. So there is simple things like validation or alerts. If two employees have the same bank account in terms of potential fraud, you can manage those sort of things through the system. And obviously you can also manage multiple organizations with different employees working in different legal entities as well, of course. So from the system, we also have the ability to view information. So if I wanted to see add car benefits, we can add car benefits. If you wanted to see the payment history of an employee, then you can view the information. So this will basically give you a full breakdown of all the different payment cycles that this person's done, and it will then enable you to then see all the information that the amount you paid and so on and so on. Again, you get a lot of information. If you want to see information about the student loan, you can obviously see what student loan, what level of student loan, you can manage that. Payment attributes, obviously this is the different allowances they've got, and obviously you can manage and set them up per employee, and it's all configurable, so you can, if you have different attributes, you can manage and set each of those up yourself. And then obviously a verification process to make sure that all the information has been entered correctly, obviously, which is part of the key thing in terms of compliance. We also have the ability to do things like run a series of reports. So from here, for instance, if there's a new starter, I can now run my starter checklist. So it gives you a full HMRC compliant starter checklist, which you can then print out. It will merge the data as well from the system, and then you can then save it, send it to HMRC, and all the boxes are all exactly the right height, the right width, the right location. So HMRC will then automatically process it as you would expect. And the same thing with P45 and P60, P46 and P11Ds, and so on. You can basically print off automatically and then generate for an employee or for a series of employees all of the standard HMRC documentation. And obviously, because it's standard capabilities, any of the data is mergeable. So if there's certain requirements, this can be managed as well. You can also have different dimensions as well against an employee, such as what department, or they can actually have multiple departments as well. So you can actually say somebody's part of 2 different departments from a reporting point of view, and you can also break down the salary accordingly as well. You can also have different dimensions as well within the system. If I go back to my employee record, you also have the ability to manage absences and also run certain reports, such as employees by contact, by list, and so on. So all the standard stuff you'd expect in a standard payroll system. In terms of setup, everything is configurable. So if you, for instance, you had a different tax setup, or you wanted your own payroll attributes, because you have something specific to your organization. You can configure the system, and we can also configure it to work across any region, any country with a standard setup as well. In terms of processing payroll, we'd walk you through the process. Is essentially you can create a new payroll process. So I can choose a cycle, I can choose a term, and I can then choose a period. There's two ways to do this, just talk you through. So the first one is to import all the standard report. You can obviously, when you import the employees, you can then choose by a different dimension or a different code, depending on the different dimensions. And then obviously you import the data. We can then see all the information, and we can actually update the information. So we can say actually how many days people have worked. So again, this is kind of sort of concept of how many weeks, how many days, and so on. Once we enter the information, we can then get the attributes. And then once we get the attributes, we can then see the information, and then you then have the ability to then process the attributes. You can then calculate the net pay, and then obviously you can then post it, or you can then post and send. If you post and send, it will then send the information and the pay slips to all the relevant employees, and then calculate all the information for you automatically. It will then automatically send the data to HMRC, and then it will show you the status. If I go into one which has already been processed and approved, you can then go in and see the information, and obviously from each of these areas, we can select a record and then view the statistics. And then you can actually see exactly how all the calculations are being made up for that employee, both from a tax breakdown, in terms of how much they're earning, NIC, employee contributions, pension, and also loan as well. So you can get a real granular level, so you can see not only what's happening, you can see exactly how everything is made up. So you can see actually this person's got a student loan, and they've also got the NIC employment, and we can also see the tax and the tax breakdown and how much they earn and what the percentages are. It is all configurable, as I said, because it does allow for multi-currency as well and multi-region. So finally, obviously you've got the payroll plans, you've got the employee ledgers. So again, you have the ability to view information. So for instance, if I was to select a particular employee and I press Alt F3, it then allows me to filter. And now I can then see all the information, all the general ledgers, transactions, which gets posted into the finance system as well. And again, all this information is configurable. And then it also enables you to then run reports or run pay slips as well, both from a high level or a single level. So you can obviously run group reports, so if I wanted to run the pay slips for this particular payment run, I can go in and then carry it out as well. So I'm doing an individual level, you can then do batch jobs, and you can see the pay slips is all based upon it's configurable in terms of branding, and you can see all the information. One of the things I will show you as well moving forward is the ability to manage this process more effectively and in more of a streamlined way. So I go back to my presentation. So using the Power Platform, so Power Platform is a combination of the reporting, the some automation, and it's also a solution in terms of end client solution apps. We can actually take that process, so you can see the architecture of that typical solution we've talked about. So potentially a HR solution, potentially the BC solution, working with the common data store, which is essentially the backbone of the Power Platform, and then obviously generating SharePoint documents, mail merge using Word to produce all those different HMRC, P60, P45, and so on. And then obviously integrating to the HMRC using things like Power Automate to do their management. So it's really combining all these different technologies, and essentially we can take the same interface we had in BC, and then we can build the same thing, but in a much slicker, easier process. So as you can see here, we can select a period. We can either run a report, which as you saw, we had the ability to go in and see historical ones, or to create a new one. We then have the ability to automatically pull the updates. This could be from a HR solution, it could be from a spreadsheet where you're managing the data, or just using the standard data set held within Azure and BC. We then have the ability to view the information, so exactly the same sort of way as we had before. We then have the ability to make manual adjustments. So this could be, as an example, an extra car allowance, this could be a salary deduction, this could be a loan, this could be a period of sickness. And also the nice thing about this is you have the ability to add a comment, an adjustment level, which will then actually appear on the pay slip. So which is one of the key requirements in most organizations. If you do make an adjustment to somebody's salary, they want to know exactly what and why. And this gives you that capability. So you can see once you've go for an adjustment process, there is an automatic approval process, which you can either approve if you have the right level, or depending on the type of adjustment, you can have an approval flow where it sends a notification to a manager or line manager or HR and so on. Once you've gone through the adjustments, you then calculate the payroll. So this will generate all of the results in terms of the benefits, the total deductions, your net pay, and it will give you the complete information. Once you then go through the calculations, it then generates your tax liabilities in terms of NIC, PAYE, both employee and employer, and then it shows you a breakdown of all the payment information. And then you have the ability to send to HMRC. Once you send it to HMRC, you can then from this point email the payslips automatically to the staff, or you can then print them and then you want to send them to somebody. So it does actually work as a bureau exercise as well as an individual organization. And then obviously you can then see the individual status from the HMRC to make sure everything's been approved. And if not, you can then review it and also edit it, even undo it and reapply and send certain different employees within the cycle to make sure everything is as expected. So as you can see, what was potentially a fairly complex process, going into BC with all the different screens, entering all this information, can actually be made a very slick, seamless process by using the Power Platform, by turning it into a wizard with 4 or 5 steps. So it's doing all the hard work for you. So rather than entering the number of hours, it automatically takes the information from what's been set up against a user and employee, and obviously makes assumptions, and you go in and make your changes. So you're really working on the exception basis, working as opposed to the standard role. So we look at how Teams can support this process as well. So there's some new capabilities coming out in Teams as of the 1st of October, which will give you time and attendance capabilities. It will also give you the ability to do clocking in and clocking out, so within your staff. It also gives you the ability to do line management, absence and attendance calendars. It also has the ability to do shift patterns within the system. So working with rotas is particularly important. So managing different types of rotas, ability to do swapping rotas, offering additional slots by employees, and obviously managing time off requests and with a built-in approval process. So all of these standard capabilities are all coming available through Teams. And as we talked about before, Teams is becoming the workplace of the modern employee. So any questions on any of that? Obviously, we went through a lot of information there.
We've got a couple of questions. Sorry about that. I didn't unmute. So the first one. Are the tax tables updated automatically?
Yes, they are. So we provide updates based upon HMRC changes. We provide automatic pushes into the system.
Okay, and can the pay slips be accessed by the employees through a web interface?
So currently, the process is they would be accessed via a portal, through Teams, through an email, or they could be printed and sent to the person.
Okay, and would this be cheaper than outsourcing?
It really depends. So essentially, the cost is approximately £1 per employee. So it depends on how many employees, and obviously quite often accountancy organisations will provide a bureau service, a charge, maybe sort of up to £1,000 a month, £800 a month, whatever the case is. So it depends on how many employees you've got, depends on how much you're being charged. But quite often, if you have a system, it can actually make it more efficient and also cost effective, because cost is two parts. Firstly, it's the actual money that goes out of the business, of course, but also there's the amount of time it takes to manage all of the information and data, so that when you send it to an accountancy firm, it's accurate, so you're actually doing it. And obviously the hidden cost is generally the amount of administration required to manage things like Flexi-time and zero-based contracts and so on. So yeah, generally it is.
Perfect. Are employees' tax references automatically imported from HMRC? Sorry, not automatically, but are they imported from HMRC?
So no, so the PAYE codes are basically set up manually within the system. It is possible to do that, but not at the moment. There is a release cycle of new features, new benefits, but at the moment, no, it's manual.
And what license type is needed?
So within Business Central, to work with both the Power solution and also to work within the BC solution as well, all that's required is a team member for the administrators of the system, and then obviously the employees don't require a license. So essentially, it could be as cheap as £6 a month.
Perfect. It looks like that is all the questions we have. So thank you very much. And for everyone who has attended today, we'll get in touch just to see what you thought. And if you've got any further questions, or feel free to email us at inquiries@complete-it.co.uk, or obviously speak to your account manager or technical consultant. Thank you so much, Eddie.
No worries. Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care. Bye.